Good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of series 2 of our Fireside Chat. So I'm joined, as always, by select members of our customer advisory panel. So hello to all of you. I'll let you say a quick hello in a moment. And we thought we'd take a slightly different tack today. And as you can probably see, I'm sitting in a real office, which I think is the first time I've delivered one of these from a real office. I am the only person in this office, so it was a useful trip in. But it did get us thinking about, as people start to return to work, what do we need to think about with regards to the office network as we know it, the data center that we connect services into, our cloud infrastructure, and of course actually the home as well, so where most of us have spent a lot of our time. So and if I look at some of the trends really that we've been seeing, we continue to work with clients, helping them drive their cloud transformation forward. We're seeing more and more applications obviously shifting to cloud. I think I was reading a stat yesterday about just how many different cloud applications different organizations have. And I saw another interesting stat around, actually, if you think about the office now, then organizations that might have had 2 or 3 offices before COVID have actually got hundreds of them now, because essentially everybody's home is their office, has been their office for a long time. And of course, as we start thinking about people coming back to work, or at least coming back to the office for a portion of time, is it time to think about what the future of networking and security and those kind of things look like? So I think before we kick off, and we've got 5 topics we're going to try and cover today. So we're going to talk about the future of the office network. We're going to talk about home, the users at home. How do we make sure we don't forget them? We're going to talk about end user performance and end user experience, because that's very different now to probably what it used to be. And then we're going to visit an age-old topic, favourite of mine, around the VPN. And I think we did a session last year actually talking about whether the VPN was dead or whether it would ever die. And then we're going to try and bring it together at the end and think about what does this equate to as a kind of hybrid environment, I guess. What we do know is that what we're coming back into, this new normal that everyone talks about, is different. Every organization we speak to are reevaluating what's important for this changing landscape. How employees and businesses work from anywhere. They know they can work from anywhere, but actually what's the future of the office? Aidan, you and I were talking just before we joined about just the amount of investment in meeting room technology and things to change. Offices are no longer a place that people come in to just put their head down and get work done. I think the future of the office is much more around people coming together to collaborate, to meet, to chat, to brainstorm, to have lunch, to have coffee, whatever it might be. But it's very, very different. So if I then look at where I see opportunities for organizations like us, right? So we're a big systems integrator, service provider. And so, of course, these things are quite important to us. We make quite a lot of money out of doing big network deployments and those kind of things. And I'm sure the owners are still key that revenue stream comes along. But if you look at kind of what the big networking giants are saying, so, Cisco, HP, Extreme, etc., they're all expecting huge growth, right? Huge investment from organizations over the next few years, as everybody now has, I think, accepted that the future of work as we know it is different to what it was. And it won't be going back. So, network agility is certainly something now that's not a buzzword to be spoken about. I think it's mission critical. Networks need to adapt to how everybody's working, how the applications are that we're working with, and of course, making sure we're supporting the home user. So that's kind of my ramble, if you like. So I'm gonna fire off with the first set of questions, and as I ask the question, just feel free just to say who you are and where you're from, just for anyone that's new to the show. So, Aidan, I'm gonna pick on you first. Do you have a view on the future of the office network, or have you already got it?
So I suppose Aidan Shanahan, head of IT with Gateway Thameslink Railway. You'll probably more likely know our brands, so Gatwick Express, Southern, Great Northern, Thameslink, rather than the parent company. I suppose for us, we've kind of done a huge network transformation across the entire business over the last sort of 2 years, really. For all that BT stopped laying cable to support the NHS for 3 months. We've transformed all our WAN links from an MPLS to an SD-WAN. And I think we're all the better for it, really, to be honest, with getting rid of legacy technology, legacy circuits, and having something modern and supportable to meet our needs going forwards. I think if we look at an office building in particular, I think there won't be much change for us until a lease is up or a renewal point, because at the moment, kind of, we've invested in the kit. I mean, that's very much kind of the traditional sort of, every desk could have a docking station, a wired docking station on it for laptop users. Desktops would be wired. All the meeting room kit would be wired with printing and the usual functions, really, and access control. I think if we were to do it again, I think we'd see a very different mix of the space. I think we'd see a much variety of sort of the two-person pods, because why have a meeting room taken up if someone needs to do a one-to-one? So I think you'd, instead of going from kind of the sort of, we've got a big boardroom which can be split in two, and about sort of 6 of the meeting rooms in one of our offices. There's about 8 meeting rooms in another one. I think you'd see a much bigger mix of sort of collaboration spaces, and everything from the small ones down to the larger ones which can be merged or demerged. Our biggest change was Teams meeting room systems, as Rob's referred to sort of fit them in every room, ranging from the big, huge sort of 30-person rooms down to sort of the 5 or 6 people with collaboration bars. And that's been the biggest tangible difference for our staff. We'd already sort of got full, well, I say full floodlit wireless coverage. If you're in the stairwells, you're not going to get it there, but that's about the only place where we haven't got coverage already. I think if we were looking at sort of redoing the office, we'd probably ditch most of the LAN ports on the desks. We don't really need them anymore, I'd have said, with the wireless coverage we've already got across that building and most of the other buildings. I think, to be honest, our biggest thing is kind of looking at what we do with docking stations and monitors and webcams, really, to be honest, to sort of say, actually, given everyone's suddenly moved to video calls everywhere, then the phones we've got on the desks are hardly being used. Teams with Teams headsets are being used, and the big question is, should we really be looking at sort of webcams and things like that to sort of support people? Because otherwise you end up doing the call down like this, because your laptop's on the desk with a camera and your docking station monitor's straight in front of you. So unless we're going to give them all a pile of laptop riser stands and sort of raise them up, that's the bigger thing. I think we covered off our firewalls and sort of moved to SD-WAN as part of that. So we still have kind of perimeter edge protection, but we've kind of gone from a multi-mesh network to hub and spoke as part of that with our data centers, to sort of consolidate traffic from the edge sites through the data centers so that we can sort of inspect it and better protect it there, really. But from the end user's perspective, biggest change has been the meeting rooms and the kit we give them personally, really, and how they have the facility to use it. I think.
Thanks, Aidan. And I think let's pick up on you mentioned Wi-Fi early on, and I think it's I guess there's a little bit of a we got all this network design stuff right. But if I look at how certainly how I work and how I see lots of others working, then Wi-Fi is an interesting one, because I think that if you're not coming in, I guess it depends on the way you work, right? But if you're not, I don't generally come in now to connect to a desk and work. I've sat at about 4 different desks. There are actually some other people in one of the other rooms, but so if more of us are kind of popping in, jumping into huddle spaces, doing those things, is our Wi-Fi up to scratch? And I think when we think about the office network now, do we need to think about the Wi-Fi and what needs to change? Lee, have you got any thoughts? Please just introduce yourself quickly before you.
Yeah, sure. I'm Lee Phipps. I'm Strategic Enterprise Architect at East Riding of Yorkshire Council. And I think that is one of our biggest challenges. I'm just putting together a scoping document at the moment to kind of assess our Wi-Fi, because I think I started to look at some of the coverage maps. And when you look at it at some of our core sites, there's huge holes where there's no coverage. And even people understanding where there's coverage, I know it's well and good, you can say they could walk around with a phone and find out where it is and things like that, but to the average user, it's not quite that simple. So I think we also have a number of agile projects that are underway looking at creating communal working spaces and things like that. And it's just trying to make sure that when they're thinking about these, that even if they do have monitors and docks that are networked in to the LAN, making sure there is Wi-Fi coverage there, because they quite often have the breakout spots and the collaboration areas. So even if there is that provision of the desk and dock, they're going to be walking away with the laptop to go and sit in a meeting. So that Wi-Fi coverage needs to be there across the board, really. So I think, yeah, getting that going and looking at what we've got, and even if the solution we currently have is fit for purpose, I think one of the other parts of that is we've got a lot of external seating areas within the building. So it's kind of still within our core site, but outdoor areas where there's currently a little bit of leaked coverage out of the buildings, but looking at providing good Wi-Fi coverage in these kind of communal seating areas outdoors, so people can connect to the phones for Wi-Fi calling if the signal's patchy, or access the network from the laptop and things like that. So I think the Wi-Fi is probably going to be our biggest challenge, and the meeting rooms as well. I think early on in lockdown, we put a few Teams meeting room devices in and had a few issues with people wanting to access other forms of meetings on them, which I know is a lot better now, but at the time it was a bit of a challenge getting to your Zoom, GoToMe, whatever other variations there were out there. So that caused a few issues and made some decisions back then that probably wouldn't have made now, which we maybe need to go back to and reassess and see which solution would work best for us, really.
Yeah, because I think, and thank you for that. And I think, part of where I think you've touched on some really interesting areas is around, the way in which meetings happen now, and the fact that, it's quite rare to have, unless you're having a day when your whole team are in the office or those kind of things, then you're popping in, everyone's got a laptop or a tablet or multiple sorts of devices. And just like you can do at home, right? I especially when the kids are at school, I tend to have meetings in different rooms of the house sometimes, just because I get bored of the same scenery. And I think I had that today when I was in. One of the offices has got a handful of people in, and I actually was trying to find a quiet space to go to do this webinar. And in the summer months and stuff, you'd hope, why not pop outside, sit outside, particularly if you've got quite a large campus and stuff. So I think that becomes really, really important. It's also then, I guess, kind of links quite nicely onto, the security aspect of these things as well, right? In that, particularly if you're in a shared campus environment, or people are popping out and working and, grabbing their notebook and their tablet or whatever, and having one-to-ones and those kind of things, is then security becomes key, right? Because you're now, using, potentially guest Wi-Fi networks and those kind of things. So where does security fit into that? From a, we've covered the LAN, we've covered, wireless. Where's that kind of security layer? Does that need to change? Who wants to answer that one? Paul, I'm going to pick on you.
Thanks. Probably maybe the least techie person in the room, but yeah, from a security point of view, I think segmentation is becoming a big thing, isn't it? So we're starting to look at how we can segregate our networks to make sure that we don't expose risk in various places when you get breached in one area. And I think when we're talking about networks, and we're going to get onto home networks shortly as well, I think we need to be really mindful of the fact that people do bad things, right? And that's becoming more and more prevalent. We hear it more and more time and time again, and I think that's probably one of the biggest risks on our risk registers. So I think when we're talking about networks, we can't get away from that point. So making sure that the different types of network we have are set up in the right ways for the right purposes, and they're not there that they're going to affect each other, and also the organizations as well. So I think that's probably a big thing for me. You talked about having Wi-Fi outside of a building, and during COVID times, we had a couple of members of staff that needed to go to the office, but it was closed. So they ended up sitting in a car outside the office on the Wi-Fi, getting their job done, because that was the only place they could do it. And that sounds great and it sounds funny, but actually it's the risk that Rob Lee, you're talking about there as well, and we need to be mindful.
And do you see, and that's an interesting point you raised, actually, Paul, because one of the things that and without throwing terms and stuff out there, but SASE, obviously, secure access edge is a really prominent point at the moment that every network vendor is talking about. But I think that the thing I find interesting about what's happening with that convergence is that it's bringing network ops and security together, and I think they perhaps in the past weren't that well aligned. It was a bit like, I think IT teams have always been quite siloed, and I think that this kind of hybrid world has forced networking and security and desktop teams to work better, I think, together. From what I'm seeing, I think there's a long way to go. But how do you see that space converging, the kind of net ops and SecOps?
Certainly in L&Q, we have some really good people, firstly, but I think they're all keen to learn and develop with the tech that's being developed and is coming to us in the future. So I think, we don't really like to work in silo. It still happens, right? But I think the teams are working more and more in kind of like a squad-based approaches to getting things done now. So it's rather than chucking things over the fence, they're actually having the right conversations. They're learning from each other, and I think the tech definitely helps that. And I think the other side to it is that we like things to be getting easier to use. So having web-based interfaces for deploying SD-WAN boxes and that consistent approach to how we do things helps us as well. Whereas in the old days, it would be code-based management in a lot of cases, and that's obviously prone to error.
And you see a lot more of that security side now being, I think, fueled by AI, but that risk-based approach, right, of kind of user profiling and where is the user, what they're accessing, what they're doing. That's a weird time of day. Do you see a lot more of that becoming important in the future?
I think role-based access for sure. I think zero-based approach to security, as well as the segmentation piece. So yeah, absolutely. I think we're probably all striving to get there. I don't think there's a magic answer to that. It's tough, right? Particularly role-based access, where you're taking things away from people, and they may want more. But yeah, I think it's the direction we need to move in. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah. So okay, let's talk about the other important office then, the home. So I think again, just if I think about how we've always operated, right, and if I go back 2 years and I called IT and had a problem with something, they'd dismiss it and walk away. We'll say, well, you're working at home, like I can't support you, and that was just kind of the ethos, right? Because it was my choice to work from home, or I had an issue, and of course that's changed now, right? So in this world of hybrid, we're all working anywhere. Many of us spend more time in our home office if we have one than we do in the office. I've certainly spent money on chairs and desks and monitors and all those kind of things. So and quite often now I think the users are quite self-sufficient. I think they sort of know what they're doing, and they've probably got a home network but have no idea how many devices are connected to it and all those kind of things. So I guess when we think about productivity of the employee, because now they have a choice. If we go back to kind of March, April last year, the most important commodity that we had was the 14 or 16-inch screen in front of us, right? Whereas now, we do have that choice of office or home. So if we go look at how the productivity of our employees, that very much depends on their interaction with the applications and the experience they have, whether that's on a Teams call, whether that's on a WebEx, whether that's accessing applications and saving files and those kind of things. That performance is really, really key. If I look at some of the projects that we've been involved in recently, we've been, and I thought we'd do a lot more of this sooner actually, but it seems to be we're starting to see a bit of a wave of it now. Is we've been deploying things like the Meraki teleworker gateways, mainly for kind of customers that are employing permanent work from home people, or whether they've got senior managers that are just that are working from home 3 to 4 days a week rather than the other way around. But I did expect to see that more, that kind of how do I deploy more security. It kind of reminds me of the old days when I used to do remote work and we had ADSL lines installed and our own little routers and stuff. But it almost feels like there's a little bit of some of that coming back as to how do we make sure that we can monitor and secure and protect the home users network, because ultimately they are doing work and they are therefore part of what we're doing. So I'm just kind of keen on thoughts around that one. Lee, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of challenges with kind of the hybrid working. We sent a survey out to the full workforce to kind of see what everyone was wanting to do to give us some kind of guidance. I think it came back that about 90% of people wanted to work in a hybrid way. So even starting at equipment-wise, a lot of people have kind of obviously lifted the kit off the desks and taken it home. If they wanted to come back into the office, what we've got in there for them to be available. And then when they're working from home, the initial issues are things like printing. Did they have local printers? Would we allow them to use it, which we kind of maybe previously weren't as keen on letting people do and things like that. And we also rolled Teams out at the beginning of the pandemic, and that kind of brought in the BYOD side of things, which we haven't really let people do before. And as a bit of a response, we kind of opened it up quite quickly to allow people to do that, to allow them all to communicate. And it's now a case of kind of going back and maybe filling some of those gaps and tidying some things up and making it work in the way we wanted to. And I think maybe not quite on the home network, but one of the biggest kind of impacts we've seen is kind of the well-being of users. I think that's really changed with the working from home and trying to allow people to have that separation and kind of not working all hours God sends, which I think a lot of people were really struggling with initially because there wasn't that visibility there. They felt they had to go above and beyond by a long way to kind of show the worth at times. But we've used things like My Analytics and ran a trial with about 3 or 4 of the other local authorities in Hull University to look at kind of the impact on users of My Analytics and how you can use it in Viva and things like that. And I think that is going to be massive going forwards. I think it's really benefited a lot of people. I think even myself, looking at focus time, your virtual commutes, even things like that have been a godsend for me while I've been working from home and getting used to that transition.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think if and I might come on to that one a little bit later actually, but I think if we go back to that point of, I guess the question I'm trying to get across to everyone, and Dave, I'll pick on you actually if that's okay, is that do we need to think about the home worker more? I mean, like I say, I expected to see a lot more of these kind of. I remember sitting at the beginning of the pandemic going, I need to invent something that allows people to work better from home, securely, have decent internet access, because all the kids who are at home or using the Xbox and whatever else they're doing, and sometimes the internet performance was just shockingly awful because it's not enterprise grade. And I'm techie, right? So for the average home worker that maybe doesn't, they've got Sky Broadband or Virgin or whatever they've got, and it's just a box that's been deployed. Do we need to think about providing, better quality networking experience for our home workers? Dave, any thoughts? Have we lost you, Dave? Oh, yeah, we can. Yeah.
Lost you now.
You all right? I can hear you.
Oh, can you hear me? Yes, good. Joys of technology. If only we could get headsets to work. Certainly, in our experience at Thatcher Research, we've not experienced a huge amount of networking issues. The connectivity has been good. We've had a few people living in really remote locations that, quite frankly, are on the end of a 2 meg ADSL line at best, and they do struggle with broadband and Teams calls and things like that. For those, we have been providing them Wi-Fi type hotspots, and that's actually proved more reliable and better for them. So that's quite interesting. I think the biggest thing for us around home working is really, and it's very difficult for me particularly as being an IT person, is actually forgetting the IT for some respects and looking at what people actually need. We took an exercise to sort of go back and actually find out what people need, instead of just giving everybody a 22-inch, 24-inch monitor and a dock and everything and saying, put that in your house and work. We found that some people have got office space, some people have got desks at home, but others are doing it on a kitchen table and sharing collaboration space with their families. So we've had to, step back from that and really understand what people need. And the approach we've taken is to effectively give all our colleagues an allowance for them to choose what they want. So we give some recommendations of what sort of equipment they might want and what might be suitable for them, but they can choose what's suitable for them. As we found that some people with a monitor riser is most suitable. Some people do want a bigger monitor and more real estate space on that. And it's literally not one size fits all. The other aspect that we've been piloting with some of the Microsoft technologies is around things like Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop. So, Rob, we've been trying this for some time now, but piloting it across some users, and that's incredibly good, and I think it just gives us more tools within our toolbox to be able to use for certain people for certain scenarios. If I'm honest, I love the Windows 365. It's actually things like this that really makes it struggle when you're doing a Teams call for audio and video. That's the niggling bit that just causes me problems now. Pre-pandemic, obviously, we weren't doing so many video calls and it wouldn't have been an issue, but now that's the one that just makes it not quite land for us. But yeah, it's early days and we're still trying to understand it. But yeah, understanding what everyone needs is key, I think.
So I'm hearing from, I think, from most of you, and welcome someone telling me something different, that actually it doesn't look like we're thinking about, you know, actually putting teleworker solutions into people's homes. It's more about looking at smarter ways to use what they've got, smarter ways to use the bandwidth that they've already got. So things like virtual desktop, things like you know, perhaps piggybacking off their cellular and those kind of things. Is anyone doing anything around, you know, a more of a strategic move to provision home networking? Roland?
So I wouldn't. The answer to are we doing something more strategic is probably no. But just coming back one step, I think what we have found is that our IT team have had to become a lot more familiar with troubleshooting people's problems at home. Because there's no doubt, and this kind of feels like really it's last year's problem rather than this year's problem, because it's what we had to solve in the first few months after everybody started working from home. But actually just educating people on the fact that your problem could be a problem with your broadband, or it could be a problem with your Wi-Fi. And actually the reason why you don't have connectivity where you happen to want to sit with your laptop at the moment is probably not your broadband problem, it's probably your Wi-Fi. So what can we do about that? Can we get Wi-Fi extenders? Can we get a mesh network? If you're actually looking to work in one space all the time, can you run a cable there? Can you use a power line extender or something like that to actually get you connectivity where you want it to? Because we still find that people are great in one place and then they'll go and sit at the kitchen table to do a call. Because as you say, one of the benefits of being able to work from home with your own device is you can have that change of scene. You can go and work somewhere else for a particular reason, or if, you know, there's roadworks outside, you go and work at the back of your house or whatever. But actually educating people so they understand the difference between those things, and saying, well, if you want to upgrade your capability, then it might not be just paying more money to Sky to get a faster connection. It might be more about spending some money on some kit from TP-Link or someone that you can get in the home. But whatever it is, it tends to be domestic grade kit, not enterprise kit that we're trying to put into people's houses. And I don't really see that changing, but I do see us updating our recommendations for what is good home networking kit and how you can use it, how you can make the most of it. And for some people, it's also advising them a bit around their basic connectivity. I mean, we have one or two rural people who we've ended up putting in more complex solutions. We've got a couple of people who we have implemented 4G connection with properly installed with sort of antennas that are actually focused specifically at a network, at a tower and that sort of thing, in a couple of cases for people who are lucky enough to be able to have a nice big house that has the downside of being a long way from the nearest exchange. In my own case, I've actually just got Starlink at home because I was getting really annoyed with getting a few broadband dropouts and trying 3 different providers and not actually managing to get any more bandwidth. So I've now got Starlink, and I'm running Starlink and ADSL, and at the moment they're great. The only issue I have with Starlink is the fact it costs me 90 quid a month, which is not cheap for broadband. On the other hand, on a good day, it also gives me 250 meg, which is 5 times the speed I could get from ADSL. So, and 100 meg up, which I will happily take compared to 30 or 40 down and about 5 up, which is the most I've ever been able to get on ADSL. So
yeah, but it does open questions, doesn't it? About, like you say, you know, you work in this space, you're quite happy to invest in those kind of things. I guess you've also got the other employees that are maybe now required to work from home a lot more, and you know, they might feel, you know, why should I put my hand in my pocket? Why should I pay for more broadband? I don't do IT, I don't know. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think, between whose responsibility is it? You know. So yeah, sounds like the jury's still out on that one. That might evolve, I guess, over time. And I guess what I wanted to bring that back to, then, if we move on to the next topic, really was about, you know, why it's important, right? And Dave, you mentioned some things in there that you're looking at. Lee, you talked a little bit about, you know, how you're measuring users from a well-being perspective, but a lot of it also is about performance, right? And I think, you know, I've seen probably for the first time for a long time, you know, people coming into the office, and sometimes the experience they have in the office is worse than they've got at home. But on the flip side of that, depending on where you live, of course, you know, you could have been sitting there struggling for years because, you know, you don't get decent fiber, or you can't get decent broadband where you live, and therefore you've struggled for years. But ultimately, I think the other thing that's shifted, of course, is where people are accessing applications from. So, you know, it's not like we're in the office and now we're at home with everything over VPN. Everything we use is somewhere else. You know, if we think most of us are using different cloud platforms, we're on a cloud platform now doing this video webinar, which is different to what we probably use within our normal lives, whether that's Teams or WebEx or whatever it might be. So how do we measure that end user performance to ensure that our teams are productive and are getting work done? So anyone got any insights as to kind of what you're using today or what you're looking to do, or do you care?
Yeah, happy to kick us off. And I think what we're using probably has started from a place of surveys. I think Lee mentioned it earlier. And, you know, during COVID times, we were all doing surveys to the point of fatigue. And I think we got a lot of information from our home workers at that point, you know, whether it was about connection speeds or, you know, how things are with systems or access times and things like that. But I think we've evolved a little bit from then. I don't think the tech's quite caught up with what we need though. So we are looking at things like, you know, productivity score from Microsoft, which is really helpful. We're also looking at digital experience monitoring platforms as well. So we've got something there that we're looking at now. We've done a pilot on one, and we've got some really good outcomes from that pilot that we ran probably 3 to 6 months ago, and we're now going through kind of procurement stages. But it really gives that valuable insight where, you know, existing monitoring tools that are more infrastructure focused just don't give you that level of detail. So, you know, through some of this pilot, we've seen that, you know, traffic's not going in the direction we expected it to go from some of our home users. So, you know, when it comes to patching, you know, Microsoft try and do this really clever thing where, you know, they kind of locally share between PCs some of the update files. And then when all those machines appear to be on maybe the same subnet, but all in different locations across the UK, it all goes wrong. So, you know, some of the info we've seen from these sorts of tools has unpicked that for us, so we can make changes on delivery and some of the policies around it. So that's been really good. And I think some of these tools are now getting a bit more predictive as well. So if they see something that is going wrong, so, you know, your Wi-Fi is low, you know, you can do things like campaigns and guidance pop-ups that say, you know, your Wi-Fi signal is low. Have you tried this, and this? So it's kind of getting ahead of that service desk call that, you know, will ask the same old question and get the same old response, but you can just put it on the screen in front of that user. So I think that's going to become powerful for us. In our organization, we've got some people at home workers like me where actually my level of service doesn't affect our end customer. It's my productivity. But we've also got, you know, contact centers that, you know, we've got people home working as well. So this is something that's come up more and more often with that type of line of business. So, you know, this is why we're looking into these tools. Lee's point earlier about Wi-Fi in the office and doing massive surveys to see where we've got black spots. You know, we don't do that at home. And I think, Rob, your point about that line of responsibility is really important, isn't it? And I think, you know, we all have that line from the COVID time and everyone being told to work from home. But I do think there's a conversation about, does that line move as we go forward? Whether it's us providing, excuse me, connectivity or you know, separate connections for home workers. I don't think that's going to be the way forward, but I think we definitely need to shore up and provide more support where we can.
And I think the training point is quite important as well. You talk about you know, predictive analytics and those kind of things, and some of the great tools that are out there to monitor these things and show people. I think it's also about, you know, extending that training, right, to help people themselves. You know, I mean, we all sit there sometimes, and, you know, my wife the other day was going, oh, you know, Oliver's trying to So my son Oliver's trying to download this new train route on his train game, and it's really slow. What's going on? And it's like, well, it's probably because you've got 17 devices connected to the Wi-Fi, and it was never really designed to do that. And I think this is the challenge now. It's like everyone's mobile all the time. There's more devices. Kids have had more devices because that's kind of how you've kept sane over the last 18 months. So you're right, and I think, but that line of helping the non-technical user actually understand that there is some techie stuff going on, that it's not like you used to just plug a telly into a cable and off you go. It is, the network is everywhere, right? Everyone's probably spent all their money on Hive heating and Alexa devices and all these other things, and so actually their network is being really consumed, and for many they have no ability or no knowledge of how to actually do any form of access control or quality of service or those kind of things, whereas we think about those things all the time in the office. Those things are really important to make sure that video's got the right priority and those kind of things. So I think you're right, it is a real, we touched on it earlier, but I think I expect that to change a lot, and I think the analytics will be part of that. So I think, whether that's, I don't know what you guys are all using for these things, but, things like Thousand Eyes or whatever it might be, to actually look at how we monitor those things. And that might change, I think, in the future, what we, the guidance we give to our home staff, and, and also what we do about it, whether we actually invest and put money in. And I think, Paul, you're right. It does depend, I think, on whether it's, what's the impact? Is it personal productivity impact, or actually are you losing business because you've got customers calling up, and actually it's their home network is causing a poor experience to the client, which is then costing money? And I think that those kind of decisions will be the things that probably pivot. Where that costs.
I think quite often there's the simple things that people just don't do, and I think, as you say, it's educating people to know what those simple things are. Quite often we saw that people would ring up and say, but I've got a 50 meg Sky connection, so it's not me. And actually, by the time you look at that 50 meg Sky connection that they're paying for, it's actually 20 meg, because they're not getting what they paid for in the first place. So helping people to have the right conversations with ISPs has been part of our challenge as much as anything else. And I think 17 devices on Wi-Fi is probably quite low in most households.
Yeah, I agree.
Your bells are, after Christmas last year, they're all uploading high definition video to, whether it's Google or Amazon or Ring or whatever, right? So
which I think it's going to get worse, isn't it? It's going to get more and more and more of these things. I think we've got another Black Friday coming up. It's going to be more of these things, more of these things going out there. So. Anyone else got any thoughts about what we do, about the end user experience? It kind of all relates together, doesn't it? But no, okay, we'll move on. So I guess related to that, and wow, we're actually doing really good in joining these dots up today. It is that whole thing about remote access, right? So we've got users in the office, we've got users at home. We're all using more cloud services. We've still got legacy technology. Or services that we need to use, either because we need to keep using them or from a security perspective. So where do we see in this future world, right, of where is the boundaries, right, between the VPN and remote access, SaaS services, versus we've covered lots of ground today around the network and whether we provide it, whether we don't. Aidan, what's your? I know you've got lots of legacy. I know you're big VPN users, right? But where is this going? And is this an opportunity to really think about how we change the future of remote access?
Well, I suppose we're where we are because of how we've evolved on our journey. I suppose. I mean, if you look at it and went back 5 years, then we'd have had a separate VPN client, and it would have been rigged for a bad snow, would have taken it out in capacity numbers. It wasn't rigged for the entire organization to be working remotely, or even half the entire organization to be working remotely. It was shared across our parent group, and come the start of the pandemic, we moved en masse to always on VPN as a device-based VPN. Now, we did that for a couple of reasons. One was capacity to cope with the number of people actually who suddenly were sent home with a laptop and needed to work from home constantly on that device, the other key requirement around it was the access. We could then manage, support, and maintain their devices when they're at home. So we can push software to them, we can update them, we can manage them, we can patch them, and that was key from our perspective. We split traffic, so we split tunnel. So we throw a lot of the stuff out the door locally, but there's a cloud proxy agent on there for sort of protection to sort of filter inappropriate content. And we throw all the sort of Microsoft 365 services out the door locally from their local internet connection. We've got a couple of people we had to give 4G modems to, same as sort of Paul and Roland. It was very specific. We've never really gone and put wired connections into people's houses. It was very much focused around, you have what connectivity you have, how can we make that work for you? And yeah, I've got a lovely anecdotal story about my wife's parents and living in rural Northern Ireland and getting a 4G router with a mast stuck on the side of their house, which took them from like 500 kilobits to sort of 24 megs, and they could suddenly stream TV, which they could never do before as well. It's I mean, the perils of what kit people have at home and how much is being used. We have one segment of our company use one particular ISP, and come 3 o'clock they always have a bit of trouble with video calls, and you kind of go, it appears to be very much based around when kids finish school, and that their ISP network suddenly takes the load straight away and kicks it. But from our perspective, our VPN is legacy industry systems we have to use, which we're still tied to and will be for at least another couple of years until they're replaced. And I mean, that's sweeping organizational change. I mean, that project's been in the work for a couple of years and involves the fundamentals of what we do, of making sure there's enough trains and staff there to be on time and deliver a service. So it's not a nice, easy, quick change, really. We've got the stuff we could probably app proxy instead. So we've got a few other rostering systems, HR, finance. We could app proxy it. We VPN it because we've got it anyway. And I think until the big systems go, we'll stay with that as is. And then, if I'm honest, we did a huge sort of shift at the start of the pandemic to make it work. And it's not, that now works. And we've just moved to VPN, moved to sort of device-based VPN to give us those features. We are sort of looking, but it's more future roadmap for probably about 2 years down the line, because until we get rid of the legacy application suite and move to sort of cloud-based alternatives, which will take a big project, there's no incentive to do the other bits, because I'd still be stuck with those. So yes, I know. Sort of, I mean, we're a Microsoft house, so you can use MEM to sort of manage remotely. We're sort of more still at the SCCM end and co-management end of MEM rather than the sort of the full-blown Intune cloud management, but once we know and we've got solid dates for the big legacy project, then we'll start factoring that in with how we'll manage our clients remotely post then, so we can switch when we need to. I do think that, I mean, the SASE and the zero touch thing is, you've kind of got to assume if the device is out of a physical office, it's connected to a dirty network now anyway, whether that's at home with whatever devices they have at home or sort of in an internet cafe or wherever, really. So, but I suppose stepping back from the earlier things, the wireless, we've automated that with certificates. So wherever we do have company wireless, you make it as seamless as possible for the staff. So if they walk into a building with company wireless, it joins automatically. Now, our networks, our backhaul links with some of the sites weren't previously good enough to put phones and tablets on. We've upgraded all those, and we're now looking at moving all our phones and tablets onto that. So it's where you are in your journey and what works for you, really. But I don't see us moving away from VPN anytime soon, to be honest. But that's our specific legacy challenge, shall we say, with some of the industry systems everyone else uses. So we can't move away until we lift and shift some of them. But even then, we'll probably still end up with a couple of hundred people in the business who will have to stay with VPN just because of those technologies. It's too expensive to change.
Thanks, Aidan. Anyone got a different view, or do you all share the same?
I was going to say, I think we're probably in a very similar situation in that we've got kind of the always on VPN, and I don't think at the moment there's any plans to start moving away from that, mainly for those legacy systems. I think the one thing around that we have started looking at is the potential of, even in the office, just providing public Wi-Fi, and even when they're on site using the VPN to kind of come back in for that kind of separation even. So potentially using things like GovRoam and just making that available for everyone to kind of, like you say, easily automatically connect and then VPN back in for the network resources no matter where they are, so it's the same experience. But I think the app proxy and things like that, we use a little bit of Citrix at the moment to provide a little bit of that. But I think with Azure Desktop and M365 Desktop, whatever the names are, I think things like that could be when we start looking more heavily at it. But I think a lot of our legacy on-prem apps possibly at the moment make that a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I think I'd probably agree with that as a wider view. So I think some of you, Roland, I don't know whether you want to comment. You're very much cloud centric, really, aren't you, as an organisation? Do you still use VPN? Is that something you've already phased out?
So we have a VPN for one legacy finance app. So we have 6 users in the company that use it, and everyone else is completely cloud based. So everything else we do is 365 or native cloud solutions from our other providers, which definitely does make life a lot easier. We didn't have to worry about things at all when we left site back at the beginning of COVID, and we haven't worried since. It's just general internet capacity and things. The one thing that I think we need to do a bit more on probably is the sort of on-device security elements, and there's still some of our security design is still based on the assumption that people are in the office at least some of the time. So we need to just have another look there to be sure that we are actually pushing out the right updates and putting the right content controls and things in without slowing the devices down too much, because there's always that's the trade-off between the two. Users complain that devices are running slowly because devices have to run a certain amount of monitoring and management software on them, and the more we push onto there, the more complaints we get. But trying to find something that's lightweight but effective is the challenge. It
certainly is. I think it'll be an interesting shift. I mean, I think Dave, you mentioned earlier about things like Windows 365 and Citrix, ABD, those kind of things. I think we're starting to see quite a lot of. I think we're going to see a lot of organizations experimenting with some of these things, I think, to address some of those issues, right? About how do we actually manage the endpoint? Do we care about the endpoint anymore? Do we actually, provide an environment where, we give people a budget for their devices and they can go and buy whatever they want, and actually we'll provide a managed secure desktop, whether that's via VPN or cloud apps. And I think that it's also about, as you say, is almost treating everything the same, which I quite like that approach, Lee, actually, of regardless of how they're connecting, where they're connecting. It's almost a flip, isn't it? It's almost about, we'll treat the office like you do the home rather than treat the home like you do the office, which is kind of what I think everyone did initially with the VPN, right? It's an interesting concept to see whether it changes the other way around. It'd be interesting to see that one. And Dave, I'm keen to pick up with you actually outside of this. We'll pick up on your kind of experiences around Windows 365 and stuff. So I'm really keen to see how you're getting on with some of those challenges. I'll put you in touch with some of our other customers going through similar things actually, and maybe compare some notes on those things. So conscious of time. So I was going to just try and wrap it together a little bit. And this is, number 5 was a bit of a cop out, right? So anyone listening that thinks we're going to give them a blueprint for the future of the office, I think is going to be disappointed. But I thought it was an interesting one, right, to kind of throw in there, because we get asked this question quite a lot. So we'll get our technical consultants asked by our customers, so what should we do? What is the future of the home office or the post-COVID office? And I think, as today has proven, speaking to a lot of you, I think it's there isn't one, right? I think it is very much about looking at what you've got and understanding, how your people work, what they do. I think you've all had a different way of analysing and surveying what people do and how their performance is. And it's been interesting hearing the different ways in which you've addressed some of those things, from 4G to virtual desktop and those kind of things. I think the thing that I think is probably that we know is that that future of networking is going to be hybrid. I think the boundary of everything is going to be anything a user touches or wherever the user is, and I think that's certainly set to stand. I think SASE will be a big thing. I think if you look at the way that the workforce is dispersed, I think, depending on what stat you read from what body, 82%, I think was a number I read this morning. I think Microsoft's future of work said 72%, but, it's all those kind of high, 75% numbers of people will be hybrid at some point in the time of their day. I think the user experience is going to continue to be a challenge for for IT to get their head around and to work out, where their demarcation point starts and ends. I think education will be key around, actually empowering the user a little bit more to take control and to be aware of things. Some of that, as you say, will be driven by the tools, the tools that will help them. Your Wi-Fi is a bit rubbish, try moving closer to an access point. I know a lot of the collaboration tools do similar things where, you're muted, it will tell you you're muted, or if the quality is bad, it will call you back, and some of those things. But I do think that there'll be some common trends across that mix. I think there'll be some consolidation of vendors. I think we'll see. I think I still see, I'd say, more larger organisations and Lee, no purpose moan about public sector, but I think there's a lot more legacy, right, in those environments. Lots of different systems come together, quite dispersed infrastructure. I still see lots of black boxes all over the place doing different things, and I think a lot of that will start to consolidate into any vendor that kind of really offers the full end-to-end cloud and security stack. So whether that's Cisco or Palo or Extreme or whoever it is, and it's a very crowded space. But yeah, interested in any of you have got any kind of summary points really of how do you get there, right? How do you get to this blueprint for your business? Who wants to jump?
I think there's no secret recipe, right? It depends on your business. I think you've mentioned some really good points. Couple for me, it's we're trying to focus on what the experience is rather than the tech, and the tech enables the experience. So things like seamless between office and home. So you don't end up coming to the office and then scrambling to find somewhere to plug in, and it's very different to what you've been used to. So I think it's that. So in our organisation, and I'm sure the others would probably see similarities, is we do have an office worker, we have a home worker, and that's blurred. But actually, we've got a load of people that we kind of determine as site workers, where actually they are still in sites or care and support schemes or construction places, where actually the speed of being able to set up networks is really important. So moving away from MPLS, more DIA type connections, SD-WAN, that's something that we're probably doing more on than the other stuff at the moment, because that's the stuff that's got so much tech debt. So I think we can't just focus on office and home. It's also those where it's always kind of that site-based setup, and DIA gives us the ability to maybe spin up sites quicker and maybe cheaper as well on kind of the any old kind of internet access, and then secure it through SD-WAN or other means.
Thank you. That's a good point. Actually, a really, really important area we didn't really cover was that actually we talked about home and office, but you're right, site work is important. I think you get that across L&Q, right, as well. You've got lots of people out there accessing services remotely, right? So is that something that fits into that strategy more so now, or has it always been?
I think it has been, but I think we've just maybe underinvested in that type of side of the business in terms of the network. So we've always really focused on our core services and our head offices, our data centers, whereas now, obviously, with the data center footprint decreasing, the office space decreasing, and more focus on the cloud, I think for us it's more about those remote sites where actually it's people in, so we've got probably 80 odd care and support sites. We've got loads of development and construction sites. Those aren't going away. Particularly with development, they need to be spinning these things up quickly. So it's definitely taking more and more of our time. So I think that's becoming pretty important. And I think the tech helps us, right? Being able to not just go to your MPLS provider and say I need another site set up, and it's going to take 3 to 6 months. Being able to just see what's already there, leverage that, plug something in, really helps us.
Yeah, we saw a big trend, a few years back now with, the remote, how you set up a remote site quickly. And there was a big push then to kind of, 4G or 3G, 4G connectivity, I guess. And I think obviously 5G will change that massively as it actually, properly rolls out everywhere. Will be quite interesting as to kind of how quickly you can set things up. I've seen customers this year buy 4G enabled laptops and things, so that actually they're using dedicated connectivity rather than using their home broadband and those things. But I think you're right. I think the general trend across this, and we've obviously covered lots of this today, is about the user, right, and about having the right consistent experience. And I think that the tools, and there's lots of tools and lots of tech out there to help us do those things. I think training is key. Automation and self-healing of those kind of things is key. Adaptiveness is key, but I think there is still a big play for making sure we have the right tools, right, to manage our environment. We have probably fewer tools so that they talk, that the services we use talk to each other better, so that the Wi-Fi knows what the LAN is doing and the application estate is doing and those kind of things. And I think we will naturally see this continually evolve, I think, and time will be a good test, won't it? Let's face it. It'd be interesting to see if we're sitting here this time next year, all remotely, or whether we're still all back in our offices. I don't think that will come, but it'd be interesting to see what the world has ahead of us. That's it from me. I think we're probably done. I don't know if any of you have got any last closing comments that you'd like to throw into the mix. No one's actually commented that my chair has lowered while I've been on this call. I think you're waiting. I'm going to end up just being a little floating set of eyes. So thank you for telling me that my chair had sunk. I did suddenly look back at the camera and realise I'd shrunk. So thank you for kindly not laughing at me in front of everyone. But anyway, listen. Thank you as always, everybody. We can't do this without you. You are the stars of our show. Thank you for everyone for listening, and thank you to our marketing team for hosting us again. We're going to take a break next month. I think we're all going out for dinner actually, so we won't be on the call. We'll let everyone have a Christmas, and we'll join everyone back in 2022. There we go. Lovely. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Cheers.